My name is Alara Vance, and I am 83 years old. People look at my hands, laced with the fine, papery wrinkles of time, and they see fragility. They hear my stories of a life lived and nod with a gentle, patronizing smile, assuming the sharp edges of my memory have been worn smooth by the years. But they are wrong. The most vivid memories I have are not of sunny days in my garden or the warmth of my late husband's hand in mine. The memory that is etched into my soul, as sharp and cold as a shard of ice, is the flat, final thud of a heavy steel door. It wasn't the sound of an accident. It was the sound of a closing statement, a verdict delivered without a trial. It was the sound of my son, Jasper, locking me in an industrial freezer to die. He didn't use a gun or a knife, his weapon was the biting, relentless cold, and his accomplice was the ticking clock on his expensive watch. This isn't just a story of a crime, it's the testimony of a mother who walked through the frozen heart of betrayal and crawled back to deliver the truth. Jasper was my world, especially after his father, Arthur, passed away. I saw Arthur's best qualities in him, his sharp mind, his quick smile. But as he grew older, a different quality emerged, one that was slick and cold, like a stone at the bottom of a river. He married Serafina, a woman who looked through me as if I were a pane of glass, her ambition a palpable thing in any room she entered. Their visits to my small, cozy home in Willow Creek became less about family and more like inspections. They'd scan my antique furniture, my small collection of paintings, their eyes not seeing memories, but calculating value. Mother Vance, Serafina would say, her voice dripping with a sweetness that never reached her eyes, "Don't you think this big house is too much for you? We worry about you falling." They weren't worried about me, they were worried about their inheritance. They saw my life not as something to be cherished, but as an asset to be liquidated. They saw my home, the place where I raised my son and mourned my husband, as a roadblock on their path to a life of luxury they felt they deserved. The day it happened began with a lie. "Mom," Jasper said on the phone, his voice thick with a fabricated warmth that set my teeth on edge, "I'm coming over to help you clear out the garage. It's a fire hazard." My heart, a foolish, hopeful organ, fluttered. Maybe he was finally seeing me again, his mother, not just an obstacle. I baked his favorite apple pie, the scent filling the house with a nostalgia so thick it was almost painful. When he arrived, Serafina was with him, along with a large, silent man they introduced as a professional organizer. My hope curdled into a cold dread. This wasn't a son helping his mother, this was an operation. They steered me toward the garage with an unnerving efficiency, their smiles tight and their eyes avoiding mine. "There's an old chest of Dad's in the back I wanted to look at," Jasper said, his voice a low murmur. He led me to the far corner, past boxes of my life stacked and ready for disposal. There, humming ominously, was a new, massive, industrial-grade freezer I had never seen before. "What is that?" I asked, my voice a whisper. "Just for storage, Mom," he said, not meeting my gaze. "To help clear things out." As I peered into the dark, icy interior, a sudden, brutal shove from behind sent me stumbling forward. I gasped, my arms flailing, and then the world went black. The heavy door slammed shut, the lock clicking into place with a sound that was as final as a gravestone being set. The air was instantly, violently cold, stealing the breath from my lungs. Panic, raw and primal, clawed at my throat. I pounded on the unyielding steel, screaming Jasper's name until my voice was a raw, broken thing. There was no answer. Only the low, monotonous hum of the freezer, the soundtrack to my meticulously planned murder. In the suffocating, freezing dark, I was left with a single, soul-shattering question: how does a mother's love curdle into a son's murderous greed? That question was the only thing that kept the encroaching cold from freezing my heart solid. The cold was a living entity, an insidious predator that stole the feeling from my fingers and toes first, then crept up my limbs with a paralyzing numbness. My mind, a frantic bird in a cage of ice, fluttered between terror and a strange, detached calm. This is it, I thought. This is how it ends. A life of 83 years, reduced to a frozen footnote in my own home. But then, a memory surfaced, sharp and clear. It was Arthur, my late husband, tinkering in this very garage years ago. He was an engineer, a man who believed in contingencies and safety measures. Everything should have a way out, Alara, he used to say, his voice a warm, comforting rumble. Even a trap. The thought, a tiny ember in the encroaching winter of my consciousness, sparked a flicker of hope. I forced my numb fingers to move, to explore the slick, metallic walls around me. My hands, clumsy and stiff, slid over smooth surfaces, searching for any imperfection, any latch, any sign of Arthur's foresight. My breath came in shallow, ragged bursts, each exhalation a cloud of white mist in the faint light filtering from a small interior bulb. I shuffled on my knees, my dress, the lovely blue one Arthur adored, now stiff with frost. My fingers, raw and aching, finally brushed against something different. A small, recessed plastic rectangle, no bigger than a playing card, near the bottom of the door. An emergency release. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of renewed hope. But my fingers, stripped of their strength by the biting cold, couldn't get a grip. They slipped uselessly over the smooth plastic. Then, my eyes fell upon the simple gold locket I wore around my neck, the one Arthur had given me on our 25th anniversary. With a surge of adrenaline, I fumbled with the clasp, my frozen fingers finally managing to open it. I used the thin, sturdy edge of the locket, jamming it into the tiny crevice of the release latch and prying with all my remaining might. There was a soft click, a sound that was sweeter than any symphony. The heavy door, its seal broken, shifted inward by a mere fraction of an inch, but it was enough. I pushed with my shoulder, my legs, my entire being, groaning with the effort. The door swung open slowly, revealing the familiar, comforting clutter of my garage. I tumbled out onto the cold concrete floor, a heap of shivering limbs and tattered dignity, gasping the stale, dusty air as if it were the sweetest nectar. I lay there for what felt like an eternity, my body racked with violent shivers. My first instinct was to run, to scream for help. But then I heard their voices coming from the kitchen, low and conspiratorial, and a different instinct took over. The instinct of a predator, not prey. I needed to listen. Hugging the shadows, I crept towards the kitchen door. "Are you sure she's gone?" Serafina asked, her voice as cold as shattered glass. "It's been hours, Jasper." The man said it would be quick. There was a pause. Then Jasper's voice, thick with annoyance. "It's done, Serafina." "Okay. Tomorrow, I'll make the call. Report her missing." A few days later, we find her. A tragic accident. An old woman, confused, wandered into the new freezer. My stomach churned. This was premeditated. And the doctor's report declaring her mentally incompetent? Serafina pressed. "Yes," Jasper sighed. "Dr. Albright signed off on it last week. Said her episodes of confusion were getting worse. It's all legal and tidy. Once she's gone, we have power of attorney. We can sell the house, the assets, everything." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. They weren't just trying to kill me, they were trying to erase me, to paint me as a senile old woman who brought this on herself. The last vestiges of love I held for my son withered and died in that moment, replaced by something hard and unyielding. Revenge was a word I had never considered, but now it settled in my heart, not as a fiery passion, but as a cold, calculated necessity. My first instinct, born of pure, primal fear, was to flee. To burst out the back door, run to my neighbor Margaret's house, and hammer on her door until my knuckles bled. But the image of Jasper's calm, rehearsed plan stopped me cold. He had a doctor's note. He had a story. They would see a hysterical, confused old woman suffering from an episode, just as he planned. They might even sedate me, lock me away in one of those sterile, white-walled facilities they had mentioned, a place where my stories of a freezer and a plot would be dismissed as the ramblings of a failing mind. No, running was not the answer. Not yet. This was my home. I knew its secrets, its every creak and groan. They thought they had turned it into my tomb, but I would make it my fortress. My eyes scanned the familiar walls of the garage, settling on a small, unassuming panel behind a stack of old newspapers. It was the entrance to the old root cellar, a space Arthur had built and I had all but forgotten. A perfect place for a ghost. Summoning the last of my strength, I pulled aside the newspapers and pried open the wooden panel. I descended into the damp, quiet dark, pulling the panel closed above me. The silence was absolute, broken only by my own ragged breathing. I was a ghost now, an unseen presence in my own home. I could hear their footsteps above me, their voices a dull murmur through the thick floorboards. They were celebrating my death, toasting to their newfound freedom with my finest china. The thought sent a surge of cold fury through me, a fire that burned away the last of the freezer's chill. I would not let them win. I would haunt them, not with chains and moans, but with the quiet, relentless pressure of the truth. I would become their living nightmare. The next few days were a masterclass in patience. By night, when they were asleep, I would emerge from my subterranean sanctuary. I moved through the darkened house like a phantom, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floors I had polished for 50 years. I saw the changes they had already made, the for sale brochures on the coffee table, the boxes labeled charity filled with my most cherished possessions. I was a tourist in the museum of my own life, watching as my history was being systematically dismantled. The pain was a physical ache in my chest, but with it came a hardening resolve. I was fighting for my memories, for my legacy, for the woman I refused to let them destroy. From my hiding place, I became the ultimate spy. I learned the full extent of their monstrous plan. They weren't just in debt, they were drowning in it. A high-risk investment Jasper had made had imploded, leaving them on the brink of financial ruin. My home, my life savings, was not just a windfall, it was a lifeline. Their desperation made them sloppy. I listened to their frantic phone calls to creditors, their arguments that grew more frequent and more vicious. Serafina, I discovered, was the true architect of the plan. She mocked Jasper for his sentimentality, for the flicker of guilt she sometimes saw in his eyes. "Don't go soft on me now, Jasper," I heard her hiss one night. "We're too close." He was a weak man, manipulated by a ruthless woman, but that didn't absolve him. He had locked the door. And as I listened to them weave their web of lies, a plan of my own began to form, a plan to turn their greed and paranoia against them. Days bled into a week, and the confines of the root cellar began to feel like a second prison. The loneliness was a heavy blanket, and the constant, simmering rage, while a powerful fuel, was also exhausting. I knew I couldn't do this alone. I needed someone on the outside, someone I could trust implicitly. Then, a name floated into my thoughts, Chloe. She was the daughter of my old mailman, a bright young woman in her early 20s studying to be a lawyer. She had helped me with my garden a few summers back. She was sharp, observant, and had a fierce sense of justice that reminded me of Arthur. Most importantly, she had always looked at me with respect, listening to my stories with genuine interest, not the patronizing patience of a younger generation. The problem was contacting her. I had no phone. I needed to create an opportunity. My chance came on a Tuesday, recycling day. I had watched their routine. Jasper would roll the large blue bin to the curb in the morning. That night, I ventured out of my hiding place, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm. I found a piece of cardboard and, using a nub of a pencil, wrote a short, urgent message. "Chloe. It's Alara Vance. I am in terrible danger. My son. Please help me. Check the loose stone by the birdbath at midnight. Trust no one." It was cryptic, but I hoped it would be enough. The next morning, I watched as Jasper, oblivious, wheeled the bin to the curb. Tucked deep inside, hidden amongst the junk mail, was my desperate plea. The hours that followed were the longest of my life. I strained to hear the rumble of the recycling truck, praying that my note wouldn't be lost. That night, as the grandfather clock in the hall chimed midnight, I crept to the small window in the laundry room that overlooked the garden. My eyes were fixed on the old stone birdbath, my breath held tight in my chest. For what felt like an eternity, there was nothing. My heart sank. It hadn't worked. I was truly alone. Just as I was about to turn away, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Chloe, moving cautiously, her face a pale oval in the moonlight. I watched as she approached the birdbath, found a loose stone where I used to hide a spare key, and pulled out the second, more detailed note I had left there. In that second note, I had explained everything: the freezer, the doctor's report, the plan to sell the house. I poured out the whole unbelievable, monstrous truth. I saw her look up at the house, at my darkened window, and even from that distance, I could feel the wave of shock and disbelief, followed quickly by a surge of protective anger. She nodded, a small, almost imperceptible gesture, but to me, it was a lifeline. She tucked the note into her pocket, replaced the stone, and melted back into the shadows. I sank to the floor, my legs suddenly weak with relief, and for the first time since my ordeal began, I allowed myself to cry. They were not tears of fear or despair, but tears of gratitude. I was no longer a ghost. I had an ally. The game had changed. Chloe and I established a careful system of communication using the loose stone by the birdbath as our dead drop. Her first note was full of outrage and a fierce determination. "Alara, I believe every word. We will bring them down. Stay hidden, stay strong. I'm starting now." Reading her words, I felt a surge of strength. I was not just a victim anymore, I was a commander, directing my small, two-person army from a secret bunker. Our first move was not a direct assault, but a campaign of psychological warfare. We needed to dismantle the narrative Jasper had so carefully constructed. The confused old woman had to be replaced by a beloved neighbor whose sudden disappearance was a cause for concern. Chloe began her work subtly. She bumped into my next-door neighbor, Margaret, at the grocery store. "Oh, Mrs. Davison," she began, her voice a perfect blend of youthful concern, "I haven't seen Alara in her garden lately. Is she doing all right?" Jasper mentioned she went to a special care facility, but it was all so sudden. Margaret, a notorious busybody with a good heart, was the perfect starting point. The seed of doubt was planted. "Sudden is right," Margaret replied, her brow furrowed. "One day she was here, the next, gone. And that wife of his, Serafina, she's about as warm as a tombstone." The gossip mill of Willow Creek had officially begun to grind. Next, Chloe focused on creating tangible proof of my presence. Following my detailed instructions, she made a late-night visit to the garden. She used my own gardening tools to tend to my prize-winning roses, leaving the trowel and a pair of my old gloves near the back door, as if I had just stepped inside for a cup of tea. The next morning, I watched through the cellar window as Serafina saw them. She froze, her eyes darting around the yard with a flicker of genuine fear. She called Jasper outside, her voice a sharp, panicked whisper. He tried to dismiss it, but the unease was palpable. A ghost was walking in their garden. We repeated this tactic in small, unsettling ways. A book left open on the porch swing. The scent of my signature lavender perfume lingering in the hallway. Each incident was small enough to be deniable, but together they created a creeping sense of paranoia. While Chloe orchestrated the external pressure, I directed her to my home office. Arthur kept meticulous records, I wrote. Look for a false bottom in the top right drawer of the mahogany desk. There, Chloe found a hidden compartment. It contained a treasure trove, copies of Jasper's old, failed business dealings, and, most importantly, Arthur's original will. But there was something else. Tucked inside the will was a handwritten addendum, signed and notarized, stipulating that if the house were ever sold, a significant portion of the proceeds was to go directly to a local animal shelter Arthur had supported. They weren't just stealing from me, they were stealing from my husband's legacy, and from a charity. This was no longer just a domestic dispute. It was felony fraud. The seeds of doubt we had planted were beginning to sprout, their roots cracking the very foundation of their perfect crime. The atmosphere inside the house grew toxic. The subtle reminders of my presence were working better than I could have hoped. Jasper and Serafina, once united in their greed, began to turn on each other. Their whispered conversations became heated arguments that echoed through the floorboards. The ghost they thought they had created was now haunting their relationship, exposing the cracks in their fragile alliance. Serafina accused Jasper of being careless, of leaving the clues himself out of some subconscious guilt. "Are you trying to get us caught?" I heard her scream at him one night. "Are you losing your nerve?" He would shout back, his voice strained and cracking, accusing her of being heartless, of pushing him to do this in the first place. Their fortress of lies was crumbling from within. I decided it was time to focus the pressure squarely on my son. Serafina was a viper, but Jasper, I knew, had a weakness. He had a sliver of a heart, buried deep, and it was that sliver I intended to attack. In one of my notes to Chloe, I described a small, hand-carved wooden bird that Jasper had made for me when he was 10. It was his proudest creation. Serafina, in her sterile redecorating, had packed it away in a box marked junk. I instructed Chloe to retrieve it and place it on his bedside table while they were out. The effect was profound. I watched from a vent in the hallway as he entered the bedroom and saw the small bird. He stopped dead, his face draining of all color. He picked it up, his large hands trembling as he traced the clumsy, boyish carvings. He just sank onto the bed, his shoulders slumped in defeat, staring at the bird for a long, long time. The ghost was no longer just a presence in the house, it was now a voice in his head. The tension finally reached a breaking point over the will. Chloe, acting as an anonymous friend of the family, had mailed a copy of Arthur's will, including the addendum about the animal shelter, to the house. I watched as Serafina opened it. Her face twisted into a snarl of pure fury. She confronted Jasper, waving the papers in his face. "Did you know about this?" she shrieked. "This animal shelter nonsense? This complicates everything." Jasper, who had been growing more withdrawn since the appearance of the wooden bird, finally snapped. "Maybe it's a sign," he yelled back, his voice raw with desperation. "Maybe we shouldn't be doing this." It was the first time I had heard him express any remorse. Serafina just laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "A sign? Don't be ridiculous. It's a problem, and you, my dear husband, are going to solve it." Their arguments became my guide. I learned the names of their creditors, the exact amounts they owed. They were more desperate than I had imagined, and this desperation made them reckless. Jasper started drinking heavily. Serafina became more aggressive, making frantic calls to real estate agents, trying to push through a quick, under-the-table sale of the house. They were making mistakes, leaving a trail of evidence that Chloe was diligently collecting. She had spoken to the disgruntled real estate agents Serafina was bullying. She had started a quiet conversation with Dr. Albright's receptionist, subtly inquiring about the ethics of declaring a patient incompetent without a thorough examination. The web was tightening, and they, consumed by their infighting, were too blind to see that they were the ones who were truly trapped. With Jasper and Serafina unraveling, Chloe and I knew it was time for a strategic attack. We needed a bombshell. My mind went back to Jasper's failed business, a tech startup he had poured all his money into. I remembered a name he used to mention with a mix of admiration and fear, Marcus Thorne. Marcus had been his partner. The partnership had ended badly, with Jasper blaming Marcus for the company's collapse, but I always suspected there was more to the story. I dispatched Chloe, my brilliant detective, to find him. It wasn't hard. Marcus, it turned out, was now working a modest IT job, his career crushed by Jasper's betrayal. Chloe arranged a meeting. She approached him cautiously, explaining she was a law student working on a case involving elder financial abuse and that Jasper Vance's name had come up. At the mention of Jasper's name, Marcus's face darkened. He told Chloe the whole sordid story. Jasper hadn't just mismanaged the company, he had systematically embezzled funds. When Marcus discovered the fraud and threatened to expose him, Jasper had fabricated evidence to make it look like Marcus was the one stealing. He had ruined Marcus's life. But Marcus had kept everything: documents, emails, bank records, a whole arsenal of proof he had kept for years, waiting for a chance to clear his name. Chloe had found our bombshell. Jasper wasn't just a greedy son, he was a serial predator. While Chloe was recruiting a new ally, I directed my own search closer to home. There was one place they would never look: Arthur's old workshop. Tucked away in his roll-top desk, behind a false panel, was a small, locked metal box. Arthur had simply told me, "This is for a rainier day than we'll ever see, I hope." Using a set of my husband's old lock-picking tools, a skill he had playfully taught me, I managed to open the box. Inside, my breath caught. It wasn't stocks or bonds. It was a collection of audio cassette tapes, each carefully labeled with a date, and a small tape recorder. My hands trembled as I inserted the first tape and pressed play. Arthur's voice, steady and clear, filled the silence. It was a recording of a conversation he had with Jasper, about a year before he passed away. Arthur had discovered that Jasper had taken out a significant loan in my name, forging my signature. The conversation was heartbreaking. Arthur was firm but loving, pleading with his son to change his ways. Jasper was defensive, manipulative, full of false promises. "This is a sickness, son," Arthur had said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "This greed. It will consume you if you let it." He had been recording their conversations, documenting Jasper's lies, not to punish him, but in the desperate hope of one day forcing him to confront the truth. Arthur had left me a weapon. It was time for me and Chloe to build the trap, and I had just found the perfect bait. The time for hiding was over. It was time to bring the ghosts into the light. Our plan was audacious, risky, and hinged on the frayed nerves of our targets. We would stage a final, dramatic confrontation in the one place they felt most secure, my living room. Chloe, using a burner phone, sent an anonymous text to Serafina: "I know what Jasper did to Marcus Thorne. And I know about the house. I have a buyer who will pay double the market price, in cash. No questions asked. Meet me at the house tomorrow at 3 p.m. Come alone." It was a perfect lure, appealing directly to Serafina's greed. At the same time, Chloe sent a different message to Jasper. This one was from the animal shelter's legal team, informing him of a pending lawsuit and requesting an urgent, in-person meeting at the house. The time? Tomorrow, at 3:15 p.m. We were setting them on a collision course. The hours leading up to the meeting were a whirlwind of preparation. Marcus Thorne, eager for his own brand of justice, arrived under the cover of darkness. An expert in surveillance, he and Chloe rigged the living room with tiny, hidden cameras and microphones. The feed was routed to a laptop that would be monitored by Chloe from the kitchen. My role was the most difficult. I was to be the ghost at the feast. Chloe helped me get ready. I chose to wear the same blue dress I had worn on the day Jasper locked me in the freezer. It was cleaned and pressed, a silent testament to my survival. As I looked at my reflection, I saw not a frail, 83-year-old woman, but a queen preparing for battle. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, steady calm. At 2:55 p.m., we were in position. I was hidden in the small pantry off the kitchen, the door ajar. Chloe was at the kitchen table, eyes glued to the laptop. Marcus was parked in a van down the street, watching a live feed and recording everything. Right on time, at 3 p.m., Serafina's car pulled into the driveway. She entered the house, a predatory smile on her face, calling out for her mysterious buyer. There was, of course, no reply. She began to pace, tapping impatiently at her phone. Phase 1 was complete. At 3:15 p.m., Jasper's car screeched into the driveway. He burst through the front door, pale and sweaty, clutching the letter from the lawyers. He stopped short when he saw Serafina. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. "I could ask you the same thing," she shot back. The air crackled with mistrust. "I'm here to fix a mess," Jasper stammered. Before he could explain, a new voice cut through the air, calm and clear. "He's talking about the problem you both created. Marcus Thorne stepped into the living room from the hallway. Serafina and Jasper stared at him, their faces a mask of pure shock. The trap was now sprung. The door was locked. The players were all on the stage. All that was missing was the final act. And I was waiting in the wings, ready to make my entrance. Marcus? Jasper stammered, his face ashen. What are you doing here? Marcus simply smiled, a cold, predatory expression. We're here to talk about what you did to me. About the money you stole, the life you ruined. Serafina, recovering, stepped forward. You're trespassing. Leave now before we call the police. Marcus let out a short, harsh laugh. Oh, please do. I've been waiting years to talk to them. He dropped a thick file onto the coffee table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Jasper stared at the file as if it were a venomous snake, his carefully constructed world collapsing. The accusations flew. Marcus laid out Jasper's crimes with relentless precision. Jasper's denials grew weaker and more pathetic. Serafina, seeing her escape plan evaporate, turned her fury on her husband. You told me he was the one who stole the money, she shrieked, her mask of sophistication shattering. You swore to me you were clean. Jasper flinched. I did it for us, he pleaded, his voice cracking. For the life you wanted. Their fight was ugly, a venomous dance of blame and recrimination. From the kitchen, Chloe watched the live feed, every word being captured. Then, Marcus played his trump card. It's funny, he said. Your greed didn't stop with me. It's a pattern. You betray the people who trust you most. First your business partner, then your own mother. At the mention of me, the room fell silent. My mother has nothing to do with this, Jasper whispered. She's unwell. She's in a home. Serafina, desperate to save herself, saw an opening. He's lying, she said, pointing a trembling finger at Jasper. It was all his idea. The doctor, the power of attorney, locking her in that freezer. I told him it was wrong. Jasper stared at her, his eyes wide with disbelief at her betrayal. You liar. You were the one who pushed me. You said she was a burden. You said it would be quick and tidy. That was it. The final, damning confession. Chloe gave me the signal. I pushed open the pantry door and stepped into the living room. The only thing that was quick and tidy, Jasper, I said, my voice quiet but carrying the weight of my ordeal, was the death of the love I had for you. Serafina let out a small, strangled scream. Jasper stumbled backwards as if he had seen a true ghost, his face a grotesque mask of terror. Mom, he whispered. I took a slow, deliberate step towards him, wearing the blue dress, my silent accusation. You found nothing, because I was never lost. I was right here, in my own home, listening. I turned my gaze to Serafina. And you, I said, my voice laced with contempt, you wanted a life of luxury. I hope you enjoy the accommodations the state has to offer. Jasper finally broke. A great, shuddering sob escaped his lips and he collapsed to his knees. I'm sorry, he wept. Mom, I'm so sorry. But his sorrow was too little, too late. His tears couldn't warm the chill that had settled deep in my bones. The trap had closed. In the aftermath, the house was strangely silent. Jasper remained a sobbing heap on the floor. Serafina stood rigid, the fight finally gone out of her. It was Chloe who made the call. Her voice was calm and professional as she spoke to the 911 dispatcher, explaining the illegal confinement, the fraud, the confession captured on video. Within minutes, the quiet street was filled with flashing lights. The neighbors gathered on their lawns, their whispers and stares adding a final, public layer to Jasper and Serafina's humiliation. They were led out in handcuffs. Jasper wouldn't look at me, but Serafina shot me a look of pure hatred. It didn't affect me. Her opinion was less than worthless. The days that followed were a blur of police statements and legal meetings. Chloe was my rock, my advocate, navigating the system with a skill that belied her years. Marcus, his name finally cleared, provided the police with all the evidence of Jasper's past crimes. The story became a local sensation, the tale of the grandmother who outsmarted her captors from beyond the grave. I declined all interview requests. I didn't want fame. I just wanted my home, my peace, and my dignity back. The most difficult part was the question everyone asked: what did I want to happen to my son? The district attorney explained my options. I could recommend leniency, or I could ask for the maximum sentence. I spent a long time thinking, sitting on my porch swing, watching the autumn leaves fall. I thought of the boy who carved a wooden bird for me. And I thought of the man who had left me to die in a freezer. Was there any of that boy left in the man? Perhaps. But the man was a danger. This wasn't about revenge. Revenge was a hot, bitter emotion, and all I felt now was a cold resolve. This was about justice. It was about ensuring they could never harm another vulnerable person again. It was about honoring Arthur's memory and his desperate, failed attempts to save our son from himself. In the end, my decision was clear. In a quiet, firm voice, I told the district attorney to prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law. The trial was swift. The video confession was irrefutable. Serafina was sentenced to 20 years for attempted murder and fraud. Jasper received a slightly lesser sentence of 15 years. I did not attend. I didn't need to see him in a prison jumpsuit to know that he was already in a prison of his own making. I used the money recovered from their accounts to pay off Marcus's old legal debts and helped him start a new consulting firm. I also made a substantial donation to the animal shelter, fulfilling Arthur's final wish. The house, once a crime scene, slowly began to feel like a home again. Chloe, who had officially become my adopted granddaughter, helped me clear out the last vestiges of Serafina's cold touch. I still have moments when a sudden chill makes me catch my breath, when the hum of the refrigerator sounds a little too much like that freezer. But the feeling passes. I survived. I fought back. My name is Alara Vance, and I am the one who decides my fate. Final call to action: Alara found her justice. Thank you for following her incredible story of survival and empowerment. If her story inspired you, please share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength.